Jimmy,
Hey, what's up? How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Well, I've got quarantine hair. I got this pimple that won't go away, and you know, just living the dream. It's good to see your face.
Yeah, I like your hair. I, I
Hey,
think I think it suits you.
yeah, thanks. A little
Yeah.
wild, controllable, kind of like my personality, I'd say.
I mean, mine was out here until yesterday, where I actually got my mother-in-law to cut it in the back garden.
Wow. Now I'm jealous now.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's actually done quite a good job. I'm quite
She is?
surprised. I
Yeah, I
was
was
a
gonna
little,
say.
I was a little bit worried at the time.
Is she available? Can I use her as well?
Next time you're across,
Yeah.
quarantine for 14 days, we'll get you in the back garden.
All right. Sounds good.
So, how's quarantine been for you then?
It's been interesting. We're not handling it very well over here in the States, and there's I don't know if the information hasn't been as consistent as I think it should be. You're waiting for leaders to step up, to take responsibility, take some accountability for what's happening, and to lead, right? We need people to lead. Not everybody's going to like your decisions, but if it's what's best for everybody, then those are the ones that need to be made. And I thought that our governor here in California did a good job initially, but then there's a lot of pressure, a lot of political pressure to loosen the strings, economic pressure, right? So you understand some of them, but if he's got information that the rest of us don't, that this could get really bad, then he's got to make decisions that are hard, and that's what leaders do.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar to the experience we're going through here in the UK as well. So,
Yeah.
how about you personally? How are you getting on?
Yeah, fine. I mean, I probably similar to you in maybe some ways. Lost a little bit of work. When there's no sport going on, a lot of the jobs go away, but they're starting to trickle back. We have Major League Soccer starting up again, and obviously the Premier League's going, and I work with La Liga as well, so La Liga's going, and so it's Champions League's coming back. So yeah, I mean, things are looking better, but it would be nice to go out and be able to see my friends in a more normal way. But that's a sacrifice we have to make so everybody stays healthy. It's all good.
Yeah.
So, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm right. We're here to talk about you, Jimmy.
No, that's fine. But I mean, we're also human beings trying to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, generally for me, it's been okay. It's been okay. There's a lot of adjustment to make at the start, but there's actually been some really good positives for me come out of it. I've got a 9-month-old, I've got a 3.5-year-old, so I'm spending a hell of a lot more time with my 3 girls, including my wife as well. Should really include her as well. So, I haven't missed a bedtime. I was speaking to someone earlier. I haven't missed a bedtime for 4 months or so.
That's
so,
great.
For me personally, it's been good for that initial period. A lot of getting used to, but in the same way, you want to see friends, you want to see family, you want to get back to some sort of normality.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just waiting for that kind of glimmer of hope, and it is kind of getting there, but it's always in the back of your mind, isn't it, in terms of everything that's going on and
sure.
and whatnot. So yeah, pros and cons.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I think you're finding, and people should be trying to do this, find the silver linings of being able to spend more time with family and to get to know maybe somebody that you didn't know, or to learn a new language, or to take advantage of this time is important. Yeah.
Right, getting back to business.
Okay.
Because we're here to talk about Jimmy Conrad.
All right, let's do it.
This is actually a momentous occasion for Tuesday Talk. So we've got some regulars that tune in, that often appear in the comments underneath. And this is you're our first transatlantic guest, Jimmy.
I'm honored.
You're also our first fully fledged international that we're chatting to as well. We've had some under 21 internationals and people who have represented their country at youth level, but you're our first fully fledged international. What an international. Captain America. Just to give a little bit of background, I'm sure everybody knows all about you already, but 325 appearances, a 13-year stellar MLS career, 4-time in the Best MLS 11, 2005 Defender of the Year. You 25 international caps, 1 goal versus Mexico, 2006 World Cup appearances, played against Italy, who went on to win the World Cup. That's some career to have.
It's not too bad, especially the way I grew up. We didn't have a lot of money. Soccer wasn't really an option. Sorry, football wasn't really an option. I got to know the audience I'm talking to, and I don't want to trigger anybody. My parents didn't grow up playing, so it was kind of a brand new sport in some ways. And Yeah, I mean, I didn't get recruited very heavily, and I just had to kind of fight my way up to the top. And I valued that opportunity when it came. I think maybe that was part of it. I really appreciated any opportunity that came my way because I had to fight for it. And I was very excited to see Akinfenwa do well with Wickham yesterday because he has a very similar background. And when he's telling his story about in terms of like fighting for adversity and people telling you that you're not going to be good enough, you're not a pro, whatever it may be, I heard a lot of the same things. And he had a really great statement yesterday that echoed a lot of the things that I'm sharing with people now. And when I talk to youth clubs or when I do some coaching, is that it's not up to anybody else to decide how good you're going to be at anything. It's up to you to decide how good you're going to be. And that's a really powerful moment for me, which I was about 15 when I heard that type of advice, when it really sunk in and absorbed into my brain that if I wanted to be a professional at the beautiful game, I needed to put the time in to make that happen. The crazy part about that part of the story is that I didn't know what that meant. So I found out that a World Cup player for the U.S. who had played in 2 World Cups, Marcelo Balboa, his dad said, I had one question. I put my hand up and I said, how did he play in a World Cup? How did he play in a World Cup? You know, that's the same question I get now. And the dad looked at me, and I'm a talker, so I would give you like a 30-minute answer if I got asked that. But for him, he said, well, Marcelo just went to the park and worked on his game every day for 2 hours. And that's that I was like, that's when I realized that it wasn't his dad that got him a spot on the team. It wasn't anything like that. He just went and worked on his own game. So I was like, all right, I was chuffed, baby. I knew I got the secret sauce. I knew that the plan. I knew the shortcut or whatever it may be. I knew I had the secret. So I went out to the park, and I didn't know what to do when I got there. I was like, okay, well, now what? I just stand here. I guess I got to figure something out for 2 hours. That's what Marcelo did. And I realized that I wasn't very good. Well, I knew I wasn't as good with my left as I was with my right. So I'm like, all right, I'll just start working on like juggling with my left foot. And Andy, I was so embarrassed. And there was no, like, you know, when you usually get embarrassed because there's other people around, right? I was embarrassed. There's nobody there. I was embarrassed because I just wasn't good. And I then went home after 10 minutes because I was so embarrassed. And there's 2 reasons here. 2 things to bring up. I went home because it was easier to go home and play video games. And I still love video games, don't get me wrong. But it was easier to go home and do that, play with my friends, than it was to actually face up to a challenge and to face up to the fact that I wasn't as good as I thought I was. That's the second thing. I had to look in the mirror and be like, dude, your left foot isn't good. You just pretended that you were better than you thought you were. So then I kept, to my credit, I think the biggest thing that I did was I kept pushing myself to go out there. So I went out there again, like 10 or 15 minutes. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, and then you have to start creating games and to challenge yourself. And then what it all changes, the biggest thing that changes is when you go out and you start to play with your own team, or if you're going out and playing against your friends, or you're even in a real game against other opponents, you start to get a little bit better. And when you can feel yourself get a little bit better, you go, oh man, I wonder what would happen if I stayed out for 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Would I be twice as good as I am now? And then that 20 minutes turns into 30 turns into an hour. And then you're like, oh, I wonder if I ran a little bit more, would I be fitter? You're like, yeah, of course, you genius, you know. And then if I lifted, would I be stronger? And it steamrolls from there. And honestly, it becomes, and this is like kind of a positive addiction, but it's an addiction. Like you just want to continue to get better and strive to get better. And another byproduct of this, and I know I've just gone off on a tangent, is that when I got criticism from my coach, as I started to see the world through this lens, when I got criticism from a coach, I took it really personally, like, oh, this coach doesn't like me and all that. But when I was in the mindset of I want to get better, I would actually actively go talk to the coach. What do you think I can work on? I need all the information I can get. What do you think I can do to get better? And then he would give me that, and I wouldn't take it personally. I'd be like, all right, cool. So how can I go to the school or the park and work on my game that can help me get that? I didn't want any weaknesses in my game anymore. And so I just kept doing that. And as I kept doing that, I went from being a player that wasn't highly recruited to walking on in college or university and then not getting drafted into MLS and be like, okay, cool. So I wasn't good enough for MLS at the time. What do I do? What do I have to do? You know, obviously you got to play games and you got to continue to push yourself and do all that stuff. But I just this is it. I kept leveling up and tried to make sure I didn't have any more weaknesses. I couldn't hit a good long ball. Okay, I videotaped myself trying to hit a proper long ball. Then I watched a Paolo Maldini clip. They just had this perfect thing of a clip of Maldini just hitting the ball in a real game, like a Champions League game. And I just got it, cut it out, and just watched it over and over and over. And then I tried to replicate it. I never got taught how to hit a long. This is like 22 years old. I never got taught how to hit a proper long ball. And I could get by with like these little dinky chips, but I never could hit that 60-yarder across the field. And I finally learned how to do it by watching a 30-second Paolo Maldini clip and then videotaping myself. So I would just try to figure out ways to eradicate any weaknesses, so a coach couldn't look at me and say, "Oh, you're not very good at this." And all of a sudden, I found myself playing in a World Cup with the U.S. I don't know, Andy. I don't really. There people ask me about shortcuts, like, "Oh, everybody wants the secret sauce." The secret is there are no shortcuts. You have to put the work in, no matter what you choose to do. It doesn't have to be sports. It could be learning a new language. It can be whatever it is, school, music, acting, there's no shortcuts. And the sooner you can accept that, the easier life is going to become.
I love that answer, because I actually did a little bit of research for this and looked through your career and did stuff. And I actually prepped some questions. And I reckon you've answered about 15 of them already, just in that initial monologue, essentially there. But there's so much stuff there that I want to get into a little bit more.
Sure,
the first one is that you've said there that your parents didn't play at the time. I mean, you're in your early 40s now, so this is in the 80s. So you're most probably playing in the late 80s, early 90s. US soccer isn't big. Where does this love of sport come from? Where was that first engagement with the sport?
So I was fortunate to have my grandparents were born in Denmark. So my grandfather would kick the ball around with me in the backyard, and that's where it started. From there, because I'd had that initial experience with kicking the ball, when I started to join the local rec leagues, I was a little bit better than everybody else. I had a little bit more of a mastery of the ball, and that gave me the confidence to stick with it, because I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. You know, had I been one of the kids that didn't know how to trap a ball, I don't know if I'd be talking about playing in the World Cup right now, because that initial confidence was so important to my mentality. That said, I love to compete. So I love to put myself, I mean, I would compete in anything. You name it, Andy, we're going to compete. Like, I'll do it right now. I'll do whatever. I just love to compete. It can be rock, paper, scissors. There's something that was already inherent. I already had that inside of me a little bit. And I think I had to funnel that competitive energy in a positive way. That took me a little while. I'll give you guys a fun fact. I don't even share this part of the story very often, but I used to cry a lot. So there was a cartoon character over here in the States called Baby Huey. And he was part of like I think he was like a cousin of the DuckTales, Ducks, whatever, the Scrooge McDuck, I don't know. And he would cry a lot, but that was my nickname. They gave me the nickname Baby Huey when I was on the younger teams, because if I didn't get my way, I'd start crying, or if things didn't go exactly right, I'd start crying. And now that I have kids of my own and they have the same issue, I'm like, oh my God, I've seen this before. But then I had to work through that, right? So you have this competitive, this internal, I want to be better than everybody else thing, but then how do you channel that in a positive way? And that took me a long time to learn how to cultivate and control that in many ways. And it gets down to making choices, right? I mean, we talk about the psychological stuff, or maybe we haven't, but we're going to probably get into it a little bit. When I made the choice to go try to get better at the game, I made the choice to go back out there when it wasn't going well for me. I made the choice to continue to push on when I was told I wasn't good enough. Like, these are all choices that I'm making. And you also can make the choice as to how you're going to react to any situation ultimately. And so that's really the crux. It's a lot of what I teach when I coach, and also as I parent, you know, that it comes down to choices. And I probably got off tangent, but that's what I do. That's part of my charm, Andy. No,
I love it. I mean, every conversation that I have with pros, ex-pros, and whatnot, there always seems to come out some sort of mentality, some sort of psychological element to it. And you've spoken there about being competitive. Are you competitive with yourself, with others? Is it something that's an internal drive? Is it something that's an external stimulus within that? Where does that come from?
I think that's a great question. I would say there's a couple layers to it. The first layer is I have my own internal drive that I want to prove that I guess in a weird way, I matter. You know, my parents had me when they were 18 years old. They broke up before I was born. And whether that was the environment that I was in, you know, I always felt wanted and loved. There's no disparaging of my parents here, but it was a unique situation. And I got the sense that as I got older, like, why am I wired this way? I was like 24, 25. Like, why am I so dead set on proving people wrong? Why do I have to go to these crazy lengths to either win people over, prove them wrong, whatever it may be? And then it dawned on me that I grew up in an environment where the better I looked as a kid, the better it looked for my parents, who probably had a hard decision about whether they wanted to keep me or not, right? Whether to put me up for adoption or to have an abortion or whatever it is, right? But my mom decided to keep me, and I love my mom to pieces. But her life changed. Like, she couldn't live the life that she probably envisioned for herself because she got pregnant with me. So in some ways, I knew deep down that the better that I was, the better that decision would look, because I know that she got a lot of grief from my grandparents about keeping me or even getting pregnant in the first place. And so I felt like there was an internal drive to make sure that I was somebody of consequence, because that would make my parents look better for keeping me. Does that make, I mean, I think that makes sense. And so that's really heavy and really emotional.
Yeah.
But I think that exists. Also, I think everybody can relate to the fact that they want to prove something to their parents in some ways. You know, they want, and I think this is maybe more male than female, because I have two daughters, and how they absorb information and how they want my love as a dad is a little bit different than I think I wanted it for my own dad. But we just want to be, we want that affirmation that they love us, right? And I think as a son, you're looking for it. I don't know, sports seems to bring it out of you in a different way, because there's achievement there. Like, if you get a trophy, sure, that means something to you because you accomplished something, but also, you know that your dad can't deny you. Like, he has to praise you, right? So there's a lot of elements there. I'm not going to cry on you, Andy, but I just feel like there's a lot to unpack there. And I think a lot of it does come from how and what you might be missing when you're growing up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot around resilience and mentality and dealing with setbacks. And I mean, we're jumping forward a few years, but you mentioned not being drafted straight away for the MLS, and you were in the A-League underneath there. And then there were some other setbacks that you had outside of that, like the end of your career at Kansas City Wizards, which then didn't work out in the kind of way that you wanted it to. How does your mindset always stay in this kind of bounce back type mentality? Because it's easy, like you said before, it's easy to give up. It's easy just to go, do you know what, it's not for me, I want to walk away. But yet, whenever we talk around professionals, there's always that sort of drive mentality, bounce back, and that kind of internal confidence.
I think it starts from the first time it happens. That first moment where you deal with adversity is really going to probably define the rest of your life in some ways. That sounds pretty epic and dramatic, but I would say when I was dealt with adversity, and I feel like as I explained a little bit of my background, I feel like I was born into adversity. So in some ways, I almost felt comfortable with things not going exactly the way that they should. And how do I spin this in a positive way? I feel like my whole life has kind of been like that. But I will say that to reflect what the other guys are saying that you speak to, that first time that happens, if you pick yourself up and keep pushing, you'll always remember the first time you did it. Because once you work through that failure or something not going your way, and you end up coming out on the other side of it in a positive fashion, and you end up growing as a player, you ended up learning from that experience, you really see failure as a tool to get better. You don't fear it anymore. You don't fear failure. In some ways, not that you embrace it, but there's a great Nelson Mandela quote where he says, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And I feel like that really epitomizes, I think, what a lot of athletes have, that the ones that have stuck around, especially ones like me who weren't obvious. Like, I didn't have this obvious talent, but my talent was more like in commitment, in my desire, like these intangibles, like stuff you can't go to stat bombs or whatever stat things out there to measure stuff, and I think that's what maybe set me apart with regard to why I had the success that I did. But yeah, I think when you get to that fork in the road, you're either going to quit or you're going to push through. And if you end up quitting, you'll remember that as well. And you'll be like, oh, well, quitting will just be, it's the easier option. Quitting's always the easier option, but to pick yourself up and push through, I mean, those are the people I can really relate to. Yeah, so I think that's probably the commonality you're talking about.
Sticking on this sort of theme, there's also been some big firsts for you. Your debut, your MLS debut, your international debut, you know, playing at a World Cup type things. These are big firsts that you have to have a certain, you know, big step into those sort of occasions. How do you deal with those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think again, maybe leaning on those first experiences, the first time you do it helps you in the big ones. When I got to play in a World Cup, I came on as a sub in the start of the second half against Italy. I didn't have much time to think. A guy that was starting ahead of me got a red card. He got a second yellow. So all of a sudden they called my name to kind of help fill the void that we were going to have in that position. And I was like, holy crap, I didn't have time to think. Now, I knew he was red carded for the next game against Ghana. And at the World Cup, you have 5 days between match days. There's a lot of time to think and get in your own head. So I played so bad in those practices, Andy, that the coaching staff pulled me aside and said, what's wrong with you? Because I was just so nervous. I was so essentially working through a process of dealing with my nerves that I knew I was going to start this game. I was going to start a World Cup game. This kid from, you know, no name California who didn't get recruited, didn't get drafted, as you said, all this stuff. And starting in a World Cup game, everybody's watching, millions of people are watching. It's a lot. And I knew that when the whistle blew, I would probably be fine, because then at that point you just gotta play. You worry about the whatever the play is right in front of you. That's what you're working or focusing on. But the lead up to that was bad. I was bad. I was not good. I just felt I just couldn't get out of my own way. And I think that's a skill too. And I'm talking about that with a couple of my players, and also my oldest daughter, who she has the ability to be, I'm sure a lot of the people watching have the ability to be whatever they choose to be, but they somehow can't get out of their own way. And that's a skill in itself, is learning how to just kind of be in the moment. And that took some time too. That was not an easy thing. And I think that's why it took me so long to maybe scale the heights, why I was such a late bloomer in so many different ways. Like, I had to take those baby steps to learn how to manage a lot of different things, both obviously technically and tactically, but also mentally, you know, and learning to develop these coping mechanisms to handle pressure, to handle expectations, your own and the external ones that you're feeling. And then in some ways, managing how to deal with success and failure. I mean, failure, everybody, I feel like I could talk to anybody, anyone in the world, and you could be like, hey man, I failed at this. And they'd all have a story they could share, right? But then if you start talking about success, it's not everybody's, doesn't know necessarily how to handle that type of success. And it's a different kind of beast, because you don't really know how to cope with that. And how do you keep pushing, and who do you lean on? It's really, who do you trust to talk about that type of stuff? And does anybody want to hear somebody complain about having success? You know, I mean, there's a lot of that's intertwined as well. And yeah, it's a trip. The whole mental side of the game is, I think, where it's at, and will probably determine how far you go at anything. But that's the thing we seem to talk about the least. Yeah,
and I mean, it's personal experience. This is something that I'm interested in. I really wish I'd studied it, actually.
Yeah.
Throughout university to get into. But I mean, did you have any coping strategies at all that you used to go through?
Yeah,
as a player?
I did. It took me a while. So my mom got married when I was 3, and I bring a little bit of context in here because I think it matters. So I lived with my stepdad and my mom from 3 years old, and then he died at age 43, which is my age now, of melanoma cancer. And that was hard. It was hard to obviously live that as a family and to go through with that. So there's another set of adversity to overcome in some ways, and learning how to communicate and seeing how different people absorb death that you're close to, and how that impacts everybody, not just me, but collectively, and how we move forward as a family, despite this really tragic thing happening. So I say this because at that time, my stepdad died in the middle of a season, my second year in MLS. And at the end of that season, our team didn't do very good. So there was an opportunity to go on loan. And I went on loan to Poland in Lech Poznan, which I think people are, Robert Lewandowski. He wasn't there when I was there. I'm a little bit older than him, but he was only a couple years behind me. It was a great experience, and it allowed me to kind of get away. I didn't have to deal with the pressure of MLS or any of the stuff that comes with that, or my own team or my teammates or any of that. It just went over there, even though I was with one or two of my teammates. But we all kind of did our own thing. And I was reading a lot. I was reading a lot of books and reading a lot about kind of the Zen stuff. And just actually a lot of different religious type things. I mean, it was a tough spiritual time just due to the death of somebody that was a parent to me. So at that time, I was dabbling in different types of mentalities, and obviously having these games to play in where I didn't understand any of the language, just hoping for the best to play and play well. But a great experience overall. And through that, I started to, and music obviously is the number one choice. It's pretty easy to find some music, I think, to help kind of figure out mentalities and where you want to be. It's, man, dude, you're right. You could do a whole course on experience and how that helps shape you, and different things that you learn in each experience that's going to help kind of guide you moving forward. And I read oh man, I feel like I have the book here. There's a book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And I think it's John Kabat-Zinn. And it was a really good book with regard to figuring out how to kind of holding the clutter of things that don't matter out here. Sorry, the screen's like out here, but then the stuff that does matter, really having a little bit more of a singular focus. And I thought that book helped me out a lot with terms of perspective. Other things that I would do is I started to not look at my game as emotionally. So I would start to analyze and not judge myself as much. I would just be like, okay, I could have done this on this play. Okay, and let's make sure I do that moving forward, and little things like that. So I would analyze my games a lot more analytically than emotionally. But for me, one of the biggest things that I did that I thought was helpful was I started doing yoga. So what you'll learn with professional athletes is that everybody's trying to gain an advantage, right? You're always trying to look for those little small advantages, because the higher up you go, there's a real thin line between great and good. So I started doing yoga this would be 2000. This is my, fourth year in the league. There just happened to be this little yoga school that opened up by this place we moved to. And I just started hopping in classes. And what I learned was that I really liked to do it before games. Before games, everybody's a bunch of nerves, right? No matter what level. I still get nervous playing with like these other over 50-year-olds, I'm like, oh man, I hope I play smart and simple today. It's crazy. You get these little butterflies, but that just means you care, right? I always feel like if you're nervous, it's because you care. It matters to you. You want to play well. You want to perform well. So what I would do before games, I just sit, you get there an hour and a half before kickoff and you're just jittery, man. So I'd go through, the first 20, 30 minutes as everybody does. And then I'd find a 30-minute pocket and just go do yoga. And I found a couple of poses that really helped like create space in my lower back where I'd always have issues, and my hips and my hamstrings. And it was great. I kind of found a little room where nobody else is in there. I could focus on my breathing. And I really felt like it started to put me in a good mental space, because once I started doing it, that's when everything started to scale. I was an all-star for 6 straight years when I started doing it. Defender of the Year, as you said, and national team and crazy stuff, because I feel like I finally found that routine that was really helpful to me between the ears. But it took me a while to get there, and you don't know. You're just kind of picking or poking and prodding to try to figure out what's going to be the best fit for what you need. And of course, you evolve and mature a little bit too, so that changes. But as long as you can adapt and figure out what works best for you, that's my advice on that.
Obviously, within the football environment that you're in, you're getting training every day, you're getting coaching, you're with a coaching staff and whatnot. Was there any, at your point in your career, that you had anyone talk to you about the psychological aspect of it? Was there any sort of, within the club environment or the national team environment, that was ever focused upon?
No, not at all. Obviously, not on an individual level. I think that there was more of a collective, hey, we should be thinking about this as a group, but yeah, nothing. No, it was always tactics or, maybe some technical, you should work on a couple of these things. But yeah, I don't remember ever being sat down. Now, we did have, when you go to a World Cup, man, anything that you want is at your disposal. And they offered us up a team psychologist, and everybody had to go speak to him prior to the tournament at least once. So you can go over there and have an introduction. But as most psychologists are, and I'm friends with a few of them today, they don't push. They're there for you if you need them, but they're not going to come actively like, hey, tell me about how you're doing. Like they want you to seek them out, because then they know that you really want to be there. So he didn't push, but I wish in some ways I would have spoken to a psychologist or a therapist after my time at the World Cup, because I felt like I didn't know what to do. I had accomplished everything that I'd ever set out to do and then some, and I didn't handle it very well after that. The come down from that was difficult, and it impacted me and my family in a negative way, just due to some entitlement. Ultimately, some entitlement came in. Like I went from being a guy that never expected anything to, all right, I'm a World Cup guy now, you know, and I should get a better contract, and I should get this, and I should get that. And it's hard. I mean, that's I feel like a byproduct of success. But at the same time, I feel like I got away a little bit from who I was and what got me there in the first place. And even though I was a sweetheart about it and probably pretty nice, I still feel like my mindset had changed, and I feel like that negatively impacted my performance moving forward. But I don't know how long you want this thing to be. I mean, I honestly think I should have played in 2 World Cups. I should have played in 2010, and I just botched my opportunities that second World Cup cycle because I just couldn't get out of my own way. And it's funny to think that I figured it out, but then found myself getting back in my own way again because of success. Before it was failure, now it was success. It's really interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, 2006, you're talking about World Cup. 2007 was then Mexico game, which was a big time for you. I've seen the goal, the good goal there you scored. And you're also captaining America around this time as well. So you're now captain of the national team.
Yeah, that's right, which is a big honor. I got to captain the team, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and every time was a big thrill. And just, again, reinforce all, like when you get those types of achievements, and maybe I should have said this at the beginning, but if you accomplish things that are big and obviously something that you care about and other people are like, holy crap, well, dude, that's awesome. It's really a testament to all the hard work and sweat and tears that nobody saw that got you there in the first place. And so, yeah, I didn't take that responsibility lightly. Not that anybody would, being the captain of the national team, but I can't tell you what a big thrill that was to live through, and to also to be able to say it now. To be the captain of the national team is that's ridiculous, dude. And to have it happen a few times, I almost can't believe it. It's like we're talking about somebody else, but yeah, what a big honor.
Yeah, I mean, we just got to just sit on the Mexico game just for a second, because that was also your one and only, not disparaging this factor, but your one and only goal for the national team as well.
I'm a center back, Andy. That's like, you know, it is what it is.
I know. I mean, I'm actually really good. I mentioned this in the message to you as well. I've actually seen a Jimmy Conrad goal live. And it didn't register at the time that it was a Jimmy Conrad goal live. I wish I had. 2008, I was at the Red Bulls coaching there and watched every game at Giant Stadium, and Jimmy Conrad popped up with a header. But the Mexico game, I mean, it's a big game, USA, Mexico. Yeah. It was around that time, and you've popped up. Landon Donovan had a free header from about 7 yards out as well. You've got to really question the defending. That's one for Coach Jimmy to pick apart at some point. But I read an article. It was the Kansas City Wizards, and you were talking about that goal and how much of a big impact that had, because there were teammates talking about that goal in bars and some other things around that. So that must have been a big occasion for you as well.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at that game in particular, we had a few of our European-based Americans who seemed to got preference in starting, right? Because if they're going to come play in a game against anybody in the States, you know, they're going to expect to start. Thankfully, a couple of them were hurt, and not that I wasn't expected to start, but it was going to be a competition. And so I got to play, and obviously that was my first Mexico game. I'd been on the bench for a few, one in particular where we qualified for the World Cup in 2006. It was in 2005 in Columbus. It was ridiculous, so awesome. But I never got to play. I'd been on the bench a few times. But to get to play, score the game winner, be man of the match, was an incredibly big deal. And my youth coach was in the crowd. You know, I had found out from friends that they were watching the game on TV, because at that point, that was like our first big national team game after we crashed out of the 2006 World Cup. There were no friendlies planned at the back half of that year. So that was like, people were jonesing for it. So there's a lot of people watching this game in particular. And I heard people were chanting my name at bars, and it's just something that ends up being bigger than yourself. And now I know that I kind of play it for all it's worth on social media now because it's fun. But yeah, it's an incredible feeling to be a part of the national team and to score a goal that matters to people and to, or make a play that matters to people. Because for you as a goalkeeper, you can make a kick-ass save. You know, Tim Howard stood on his head in the 2014 World Cup against Belgium. Even though we lost, like, people still talk about that performance. So, you know, there's certain things that again reward you for all that pain and heartache that you went through, and that belief that you could actually get there and you could perform when you did get there, which are two separate things, by the way, because there are a lot of guys that I know that actually had the opportunity, but then once they got there, they didn't do anything with it. It's like it was too much for them. It was too overwhelming, or they just couldn't perform at the level, or, you know, necessary to. And that goes again back to mental strength, I'd say, in some ways.
Yeah, but just going back a stage, you spoke about your time in Poland a little bit. There's a few questions that came from my followers around Europe and playing in Europe. Was that something that you ever wanted to get into? Is that something that you tried to that just didn't happen? Or it's more the latter. I would say that as a late bloomer, Europe wasn't necessarily an option for me. Coming out of college, I wasn't obviously highly recruited. I didn't have an agent. Like, it just wasn't as sophisticated of a system as it is now here in the States. But as I got older and started to play better and started to perform, nobody was really looking at Americans unless they played for the national team regularly. So I didn't really start to get real sniffs at, like, hey, would you consider doing this, until 2005, 2006. And after the World Cup, I had a chance to go to Hanover in the Bundesliga. They're like a mid-table club, maybe every once in a while sneaking into the Europa League qualifying. One of my teammates, Steve Cherundolo, was the captain there, and he was pushing really hard for me behind the scenes. This is after the World Cup, though, and I was 29. And they had agreed to my transfer fee. The fun fact about that story was I was only $1 million, but I woke up that morning and you know, when that I feel like $1 million today. Well, it's true. I felt like $1 million, and it was true. That's my bad joke. So I agreed to those terms, and I was on my way to get on a flight. I was in national team camp, and I was going to get on a flight to go to Germany to get the physical and all that. It was really close to the end of the transfer window. And then they said, actually, hold on a second. We have a 19-year-old center back that we think could probably do the same thing as you. We're going to get a striker from Rangers instead. And the whole thing fell through and collapsed. And Steve Cherundolo was pissed. And I was pissed too. It would have been nice. I had obviously proven myself in MLS. I didn't really have anything else to achieve. I'd won every trophy possible, and individual trophies as well. It just would have been nice to have a couple of years in the Bundesliga. It would have been a fun experience. If we try to go to England, you have to get a work permit. And it gets really complicated, but you need to play in 75% of your national team games over a 2-year period. And they can't just be like kind of bad friendlies. They have to be FIFA sanctioned dates, or even if it's a friendly or FIFA competitions. I was at 68%. So it was going to take like somebody, like about 10 people writing letters on my behalf. And I had Southampton and Sunderland. I'm a Newcastle supporter, so it would have been a little weird to have play for Sunderland. But Southampton and Sunderland were both interested, more than willing to pay the transfer fee. And I just couldn't get the work permit, and it was going to be a little bit more difficult. So that sucked. So, yeah, I had plenty of opportunities. I had an interest there. I would say when I was a little bit younger, prior to when my contract first ended, I just didn't have any interest from clubs. It would have been more of a hard sell. I think that the journey would have been a little bit harder for me to maybe go to like a smaller Dutch club or a Scandinavian club and try to work my way from there. And then I just feel like a lot of Americans get lost in the shuffle. I was creating my identity in MLS at the time and working and getting better each and every year. And then on top of that, my wife was going through law school at the time. So it just would have been not great for her professionally either. So it's just, you know, you take your on the field ambitions or stuff that you want to achieve, and then you take the stuff that's happening off the field, and sometimes they don't always match up. But I don't have any regrets about my career. I achieved a lot. And I think I could have achieved more. I don't have any regrets, but I know that if I had been a little mentally tougher and made some different choices after the World Cup in 2006, that I probably would have played in the second one. And then I'd be telling you about how I was a World Cup player twice, Andy. But yeah, it is what it is. You know, you make your choices, as my grandma once said, and you have to live with them. Yeah, I mean, you obviously had a fantastic career at the Wizards in Kansas. I've actually got in-laws across Kansas, and they're both soccer fans and whatnot. Both attend today, so Jimmy Conrad and whatnot. So you've obviously still got a lot of love back in Kansas for you. Now, moving on towards the back end of your career.
Yeah.
Well, concussions. 6 concussions in total, which then forced your retirement. From there, how, what, where, and when? Because concussions, one injury to get, which is obviously can be quite career-threatening, but 6 is a big number. And then for post-up, I played with you and you play centre half, not knowing this, and chest the ball down from 50 yards, which is an incredible skill to have, not knowing that your centre back can't then head the ball. So yeah, how, what, where, and when, and what was the decision around retirement as well?
Yeah, so I would say 6 documented. I would probably say that I probably had another 4 to 6 more that weren't documented. I remember playing in particular Kai Kamara, who played for Houston Dynamo at the time. He come over. I think he played for Middlesbrough and Norwich for a little bit, but he was my teammate in Kansas City after this incident where we played in Houston. And dude, the guy elbowed me so clean in the face going up for a header that when I was falling down, I thought I was at home at my mom's house for like 2 seconds. I can remember it clear as day. And then I hit the ground. I'm like, oh, I'm not at my mom's house. I'm actually playing a game. So, but I didn't say anything. It was 2 minutes into the game. Like, who wants to come out 2 minutes into a game, right? So that's part of the problem with concussions, is that you mix in this unknown injury with, or not unknown, but harder to establish how severe it is, with this hero complex that I think a lot of professional athletes have, and maybe just males in general, right? We think we're capable of a lot more than maybe we are. And so there a little bit of that, and that's why I continued to play, and that's why I didn't tell anybody that but looking back, I definitely should have come out of that game. And then I broke my jaw after the World Cup. I got wired shut for 8 weeks. Clint Dempsey, I think English fans are probably familiar with Clint, and he broke my jaw. He was my teammate on the national team. I don't know. He was just feisty with me that day. And that probably was a concussion as well. I don't think you break your jaw without having some kind of, toggle to the brain. So there's a couple of them that are undocumented that didn't go down as concussions. The one really bad one, though, that I had was in 2009 in the Gold Cup. The Gold Cup is very similar to the Copa America or the Euros. That's our regional tournament like that for national teams. And I was playing Panama in the quarterfinals, and I went up for a header on the corner, and I went in, and I got to the header first, and this guy jumped really late and hit me right in the temple. And I got knocked out cold. Well, I got knocked out as I see it, but I was still awake, and I had 20 minutes of post-impact amnesia. The problem with that hit was when I get hit, it's hard to watch now because it's on tape somewhere, but when I hit, I go limp. And when I go limp, I hit my face first, and my face is all scratched up, and my thumb also hit. That was because I was completely relaxed. So I got a broken thumb and my face got all smashed. So that was a tough one. I woke up in the ambulance. I could only see out of the bottom half of my left eye. I felt pretty calm. I wasn't nervous or anything, but it's a little scary. And from that point on, after that, I seemed to get concussions a little bit easier than I had before. Like the littlest things, even if I headed a ball and it didn't connect on it, that I would absorb it in a little bit of a different way than I had previously. And so that made it a little bit scary. And then when I got another one that was questionable, I had a headache for 3 months. So it was tough to give up the sport, of course, but it was also an easy decision to make given all the science and research that was being done, especially with CTE. And I don't know how I'm going to be in another 10 years. It all could turn for the worse. I like to think that I'm being proactive and doing crosswords and all these other brain games that keep me sharp, but that's no guarantee that it could turn south. So I had to go through the whole workers' comp thing. I don't know what it's called over in the UK, but try to establish an insurance policy ultimately that due to these injuries, my medical will be covered for certain parts of my body, and my brain is covered. So it gets pretty heavy pretty fast. What I'll say is, and there's a big conversation here in the States because we're trying to outlaw heading at like ages 10. Well, I think you have to be older than 10 years old, but I think they're trying to push it to 12 at this point. The problem is we can go over proper heading technique, right? You kind of come up, almost like your full body, so your neck's stable. But the problem is, this is where I had a lot of issues, is that when you go up for a header and you're competing with another grown-ass man, it's not as simple as like he's just going to let you, hey, oh yeah, I'll get out of your way. I'm going to go up and let you have the header. No, you go up for the header and you're challenging with somebody else who's also a superb athlete. And now your balance is off. So now when you go up for the header, you're like, your back And now now it's all neck, where you're absorbing it with your brain. And yeah, that's what they need to figure out how to avoid is these collisions. I don't want to get rid of heading either. Obviously, I've got a great goal against Mexico. Can we roll the clip of that goal against Mexico? Is that possible? But I don't want to lose it. But I just feel like maybe the goal kicks could maybe get eliminated in some ways. I think that's where a lot of those were the issues. Not so much as crossing or even set pieces, but I don't know. Concussions are scary, and I think if anybody feels like they potentially have one, they should go talk to somebody right away, because it's there's a lot more science and a lot more people that understand how to help and cope, and it's nothing to push through. That's an injury you should not try to push through.
Yeah, and then for retirement, I mean, you've obviously got a lot of stuff going on at the moment. You've got your media career, your esports stuff that you're doing. You've got your own YouTube page, of course. How was that initial first step into retirement for you then?
It was tough. Once the decision was made that I wasn't going to play anymore, I'll just be transparent with everybody. I went up to the car as fast as I could. I called my wife, and obviously we've been talking about it because it had been out there for a couple months that I was having issues and a headache. And I called her once it was final. It was done, and I couldn't even speak, man. I was just crying and crying and crying. And she thought somebody in my family had died. Like and that obviously is super harsh to think of it that way, but also something had died. Like my career was over. My whole identity was gone. The only thing that people knew me for was being a player. My family and best friends, like I was their professional athlete friend. I was doing something cool, and that was gone. And nobody knows. They don't teach you how to handle that part of it, that transition, that losing of identity and trying to find yourself again. I think the biggest thing that helped me was the sooner that I accepted that I was going to have to start all over, the easier the transition became. What happens is you think, oh, well, I played in the World Cup, man. I mean, they should be calling me for jobs. I shouldn't have to call anybody, and that entitlement kind of encroaches again. Not maybe entitlement where you haven't earned it, because I feel like you have earned the right to open up a few doors and get some offers and potentially be on TV or get a coaching, you're head of coaching for a club or whatever it is. But that's not maybe 1% of the people that happens to. Like, you still have to go out there and you have to earn it. But it's just hard because you've worked so hard in this area to be good at this. You want that to matter. You want it to count in the next thing you do. And it ends up working out that way. I'd say for my media stuff, because I played, I feel like I have a little bit more credibility when I speak about the game than maybe somebody else. Well, not everybody, because I'm an American, so I clearly don't know anything about the sport. But which I love, by the way, because I call it soccer and not football. But I'm just trying to trigger everybody in the chat. But
no one's mentioned it.
That's good. Well, they will. They will now. But I think what I end up learning the most from my second career now, as I've transitioned, not only the acceptance of that I have to start over, but the fact that all the habits and disciplines that helped me become a professional in the first place really, really help you out in your second career. Really, I mean, just having a goal, focusing on that goal, and just trying to get better, dealing with adversity. And yeah, it's great. But I will say that you can't just deny that you're in pain when it happens. This happens to anybody. Like when I remember going from high school to college, you shed that it'll never be the same. You'll never hang out with your high school friends again. It'll never be that moment's gone. And you have to process that feeling. I remember it thinking, man, that's it. Like, I'm moving on to something else. I'm excited about what that is, but I loved what I had with my friends in high school, and so we all go through it in our own little ways. Now, I just feel like when you put in, 20, 25 years of your career and your identity is all wrapped up into being a player, that's a little bit harder and takes a little bit longer to shed. So I was probably depressed for about 6 or 8 months, where I just couldn't shake it. I didn't know how to fight my way out of it, other than this stuff looks cool. I'll try this media stuff. I guess YouTube's all right. And then honestly, what the big thing was for me was that we went to the Euros in 2012. That was in Poland and Ukraine. And I was getting paid to be there, one, which is awesome. And second, I got to just hang out and get drunk with fans. I was like, you know what? I could probably do this. This is a pretty cool job. I can probably figure this out. And then once you realize that this job exists and you're kind of creating it in some ways, you don't want to give it away to anybody. So you just work as hard as you possibly can, just like you did as a player, to kind of how do you separate yourself from everybody else. And then the whole thing comes back full circle, Andy. Like, it just doesn't go away. Everything that gave you success the first time is the same kind of things you're going to lean on to have success the next time.
Yeah, life lessons with Jimmy Conrad. I could sit and listen to this all day, but I am a little bit conscious of time. I think we're down to the last 8 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So I'm going to finish with some quick fire questions. Now, these are quick fire questions.
Yes, quick answers, quick fire. Got it.
These are quick fire questions. So these have the majority of them have come in anyway. The first one is from I_Will_I, whatever that means. What's the proudest moment of your career, apart from obviously winning the Wembley Cup with #United?
And that's everything else is a distant second to that. I would say getting named to the World Cup team. Just that moment of being named on the team after so many years of struggle and people giving me a hard time about not being good enough. It's a nice middle finger to a lot of people. So it was a good moment. So yeah, I would say that.
At Rehad_Halili says, who's the best defender in the world at the moment?
It's hard to get away from Virgil van Dijk. I really like what he's about, and he's so complete as a player. What I don't think he gets enough credit for, maybe he does, is just his presence. You know, he's a good communicator. I think players play better when they're around him, and I think that's a testament to a good defender is how the players play around you. Are you raising their game? And I think they do. I think Sergio Ramos, people love to hate him, but the guy's a goddamn winner. So I'd probably throw him in just in terms of all the things he's accomplished in his career. But I would say at the moment, Virgil van Dijk.
Ultimate centre-back partnering then at the moment, you'd go for Ramos and Van Dijk.
Yeah, I think Ramos is just a big game player, man. And it's one of those things that I try to, if I'm evaluating somebody and somebody says, oh, well, you know, Jadon Sancho versus Kai Havertz, or I'd go like, well, who would you trust in a big game? Like, it doesn't really matter in some ways how their form is. I mean, it does obviously to a certain extent, but guys who have the track record of knowing how to win big games, it's different. It's different than anything else. You need guys that know how to handle pressure and have experience, and will get the most out of the players around them. So, yeah, I'd probably say Van Dijk and Ramos. That's not a bad shout.
Yeah, great question. It's just coming from Greg_Baxter. He said, what's the most underrated moment in your career?
Underrated?
Yeah.
I guess one that doesn't get appreciated enough. Well, I had a clean tackle on Messi in the Copa America, and he doesn't get tackled very often. So I would say that, though I'm starting to roll that clip a little bit more. Because it's not every day that you get to tackle Messi in a real competition. So that probably stands out.
Yeah, I mean, that might lead on to one of my next questions. But first of all, who's the best player that you've ever played with?
I would probably say, man, I played. Claudio Lopez was very good. He played for Valencia, won the Champions League, played for Argentina. Yeah. Man, so good. But I'll keep it American. I would say probably Claudio Reyna, who played for Man City and Borussia Dortmund, amongst other clubs. I think he played for Sunderland as well for a little bit. He played in 4 World Cups. His son Gio Reyna plays for Borussia Dortmund right now. I mean, the guy, you could play the ball to him in any situation, and he could get out of it and then make the right pass. And John O'Brien also, he grew up in my area, played for Ajax at 18. Both of these, I appreciate these guys because as a center back, you always like to have an outlet in midfield. And when you play to guys that know how to handle the ball under pressure, you appreciate them to a level that I can't even describe how important that is. I obviously shout out to DeMarcus Beasley and Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey, of course. Those guys are magicians. And we've had some amazing goalkeepers with Tim Howard and Casey Keller and Brad Friedel. So there's plenty of guys for me to choose from, but those would be but Claudio Reyna kind of stands out.
Yeah, some notable mentions there as well. Some big game players. But
yes, a lot.
As big as the next question, which is who's the best player you played against?
So I had the opportunity to play against Messi and Scholes and Giggs. I played against Manchester United in a friendly.
Which we didn't touch on, but that's also a bit of a momentous occasion in your career for the wrong reasons.
Yes, of course, yeah. It's okay. We won the game, so I feel better about that overall. Messi didn't really necessarily run around me all that much. Obviously, he's out on the wings. So I think, not that I didn't appreciate the guy's lightning quick and always looks to play forward. And he was 100% super special. And he still is. But the player that I really just Guy's unstoppable. You cannot defend him. I got to play against R9 Ronaldo in the Bernabeu, Real Madrid. And, dude, he had 2 half chances, and he didn't just score 2 half chances. He put him in the side netting. I was like, this guy, and you can't defend him, dude. He can go left. He can go right. He can hold the ball up. He's good in the air. He can score. I just was like, I had seen what I thought were world-class players before, and then I ran into R9 Ronaldo, and I was like, all right, I have seen it, and I've learned a lot from these 90 minutes, and I bow down to your greatness. So it would be him.
R9 Ronaldo is peak, or R7 Ronaldo? No, in his peak. Peak and peak. R9.
Peak and peak? I think R9 Ronaldo is – I mean, they're different players, but I would say in their peak – I mean, if the kids are in the chat going – Cristiano, they just didn't see R9 Ronaldo at his peak. That's the only reason, because if you see him at his peak and you see what type of player he was, I mean, the guy could win World Cups by himself with Brazil. I mean, the guy's ridiculous. So I'd say R9 Ronaldo.
Who was your idol growing up?
My rival?
No, your idol.
Oh, my idol. So Eric Winalda was a player that I really looked up to on the men's American national team. He played in Germany in the Bundesliga. He just was really brash and had this really outgoing personality and attitude. Like, he didn't care if we were Americans. He was going to get on the field and kick your ass anyway. And I love that about him, because it seemed like we'd always, in some ways we still do, like, bow down to everybody else because we're Americans and we shouldn't know anything about the game. So I like that attitude. We're friends now, which is the craziest thing. I had a poster of him on my wall, and now we're friends. So that's crazy. But yeah, he was probably one of the players. And then Marcelo Balboa, the story I told earlier, talking to his dad, he was a center back, and we're friends too. So it's a trip. But yeah, those 2 guys probably stand out for me. Right.
We've got 1 minute 35 left. You've got one piece of advice you can give to a young player. What is it?
Oh, man. You got to touch the ball as much as possible. It's all there for everybody. I'm not, as I said before, especially talented at any one thing, especially with the ball. But if you put the time in and put the work in, it's all there for you. It's just, are you willing to put it out there? Are you willing to fail? And yeah, just touch the ball every day, run every day. I don't know. I'm usually good with words, but for this one, it just feels so big and epic, but it's all there if you want it. And you just got to believe in yourself. And that's probably the hardest thing sometimes. So I wish I was more eloquent going out of this, man. I feel like I'm usually good, but I feel like I've given you enough over an hour. Just watch this whole thing. Here's the advice. Watch this whole thing back. You know what? Go watch my Draw My Life on YouTube. Type in Draw My Life, Jimmy Conrad. Watch that, and that will be 8 minutes of all the information that you need.
Jimmy Conrad, that is an absolutely fascinating hour. Thank you so very, very much for coming and being part of this and being our first international, our first transatlantic guest on this. Fascinating. What a guy. Everybody, show your appreciation to Jimmy in the chat. Give him a little clap, a little bit of love. Go follow his
thank you, guys. Thank you, Andy. This was awesome. And I'm honored to be your first international guest.
Thank you very much, Jimmy.
All right. See you soon.
Yeah, come play it back and join us in hashtag.
I can't wait. I'm just waiting for the chairman to give me a call.
Nice one.
All right. See you, Andy.
Right.